Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzhak Reuven speaking to you from south of Jerusalem, here in the holy, beautiful, and beleaguered land of Israel. Today is the 24th day of the month of Tammuz, 5784. It's July 30th, 2024. This coming Shabbat, we read a double portion, a double parsha mechuberet, as we say in Hebrew, Matot-Masei. The final concluding parshiot of the book of Numbers begins in book of Numbers chapter 30 verse 2, concludes chapter 36 verse 13. We always read the first parsha, the first reading from the book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, and the Shabbat preceding Tisha B'Av, and so for that reason these two concluding readings from the book of Numbers are combined and will be read this coming Shabbat. Reading the first Parsha Devarim of the book of Deuteronomy before Tisha B'Av is a long custom that we adhere to. So that's why the grouping of these two parshiot are often grouped together, Matot and Masei. Matot means actually it means literally staffs, but it's referring to the heads of each of the tribes, and we'll find out in a minute, and why in a minute. And Masei is a plural form of journeys. These are the journeys. So as we wrap up the book of Numbers, the book which chronicles Israel's 40 years in the wilderness, and we get a wrap up of all the places, 42 places in all, where Israel encamped throughout the 40 years in the wilderness, and we'll be talking about that again soon. This coming Shabbat is also Shabbat Mavarchin, meaning it's the Shabbat which precedes Rosh Chodesh of course. Av is the 5th month of the Hebrew calendar, and let's just have a look. Rosh Chodesh Av is going to be, if I am not mistaken, Rosh Chodesh Av is going to be on the, I believe, Sunday evening next week, Sunday evening. And of course that begins the 9 days of Av, in which our customs of mourning that we're following throughout these 3 weeks, Bein HaMetzarim, as they're called in Hebrew, between the straits, 3 weeks of focusing on the Holy Temple. Of course, we at the Temple Institute focus on the Holy Temple every day of the year, but for many people, for better or for worse, these 3 weeks are where they really think about the Holy Temple. Hopefully, they're thinking about the future Holy Temple, not simply the Holy Temple that was destroyed 2,000 years ago, but the future Holy Temple, because it is within our reach, within our power, if we so will it, to rebuild the Holy Temple. And that really, I believe, is the purpose of the 3 weeks during our time. Of course, before the establishment of the modern state of Israel, when all of Israel was in galut, in exile, we can only long for and dream about rebuilding the Holy Temple and hope for some miracle which would enable it to happen. And that miracle happened. We returned to the land of Israel. We won the Temple Mount in the 6-day war. We liberated the Temple Mount. So it's no longer a far-fetched dream to rebuild a Holy Temple. It's actually within our power. I'm not saying that it's an easy thing to achieve in light of world politics, but certainly the know-how and the ability to rebuild a Holy Temple is in the minds and the hands and the hearts of the nation of Israel, and we simply need to convince the world that this is what is necessary. And that is also what the Temple Institute tries night and day to achieve, to create excitement and vision about the Holy Temple, what it can hold for us in the future. And may that future be soon. So, back to our subject. Actually, I'm going to introduce a new subject now. As I'm sure you have heard, 12 young innocent children were slaughtered on Shabbat afternoon in the northern Golan Heights town of Matot-Masei, a Druze town, very close to the border with Syria. They were playing, as we say in America, soccer, as we say in the rest of the world, football. And families were out and having a good time, and a missile fired by Hezbollah, a missile made in Iran and sent to Hezbollah by Iran, was fired into Israel and killed 12 children. I think the death toll might even be higher by now. Injured, seriously injured, dozens of people. And Israel is poised to retaliate. I don't know what the retaliation will be. As far as I'm concerned, Israel should have retaliated within hours before the world could say, don't do it. Before Hezbollah could say, if you bomb us, we're going to bomb you, and all the other nonsense. Israel should have already struck hard, but we didn't. I'm sure there are valid considerations for that. Fact is that Israel has been fighting a war for 10 months, and we've had people in the reserves fighting constantly over those 10 months. And these are people with families and businesses and jobs. So Israel is under tremendous strain. I imagine that most, if not all of you, heard Netanyahu's speech a week ago in Congress, the United States Congress, that citadel of democracy. And his speech, I think, was a brilliant speech. He touched on all the important points. I think he spoke with great pride and gave great pride to Israel and Jews around the world, and to people who support and love Israel. But we have a problem, and that is the United States government does not want Israel to win this war. That just became even more clear, undeniably clear, when immediately after this savage, brutal attack by Hezbollah on the soccer field, killing 12 innocent children, the United States said to Israel, don't retaliate, don't hit Beirut. The United States United States under democratic policy does not want Israel to win. The United States under democratic policy has forged an alliance with Iran and its proxies, and it doesn't want Israel to hurt Iran's proxies. It still wants to come to some kind of agreement with Iran, which is not going to happen because Iran's not stupid. Why make an agreement with a weak government when you get everything you want and everything you need without an agreement? And this is the policy not of Biden, but of the Democratic Party. It began with Obama, and he is still the major influence in the White House, and he will be the major influence in the White House if Kamala Harris gets elected. So don't fall for any nice statements by Kamala Harris. Not that she's said anything yet. I don't think she's said anything yet to this moment about the massacre in the Golan Heights. Not only does that show her antipathy towards Israel, but it also shows her complete lack of knowledge, lack of ability, lack of readiness to take on the world as a potential president of the United States. I think she is incredibly underqualified, and I don't think she will be given the reins, even if she does get elected president, because I think she will be under the control of much more powerful forces in the Democratic Party. and of course I'm referring to Obama and his many underlings, the ones that populate the Defense Department and the Pentagon and the State Department under the Biden administration will still be there under a Harris administration. Even her current advisors, foreign policy advisors, are known currently now, while during her campaign, are known sympathizers with Iran and hostile to Israel. So there's really little choice, or no choice, for anyone who considers the interests of Israel in the coming elections. Donald Trump, in his last administration, was a great friend to Israel, and the people who he populated his presidency with, his administrators with, were great friends of Israel. Again, if he's reelected, we don't know who will fill those positions, but he has a track record, and he quite known to everybody, has a very I don't know how to call it, volatile personality, unpredictable personality, unpredictable but sort of in a predictable way. But his foreign policy and much of his other policy, to tell you the truth as I see it, while he was president, was pretty steady. There was a lot of turmoil because there was tremendous pushback against him and attempts to undermine him and attempts to oust him. But when you look at the policy itself, things were pretty consistent and pretty steady, and I would imagine that if he is elected a second time, that his policy toward Israel will be very favorable. His policy toward Iran will be very unfavorable, and Israel will have the backing that it once had, the United States, to pursue our interest here. And this may be one, I know that, the longing of the Israeli government right now would be to be able to hold off our enemies until Donald Trump is reelected, and then be able to go full force against our enemies with the backing of the United States government. Of course, you can't determine policy based on what your hopes are for the future, but certainly there's little to hope for, either in the current Biden administration. They're not going to become any less hostile to Israel, and if a potential future Harris administration, they're not going to become any less hostile to Israel, only more so, because that is the direction of the Democratic Party. This is what they want. And this whole forging of an alliance, the green-red alliance, they call it, between the progressive West and fascist Islamicism is what's in vogue, and it's pushing and pulling the Democratic Party in its direction. So and we all are in very tumultuous and troubled times, and Israel, like Netanyahu said, and Congress is really fighting the fight for all of us who value our freedom, our liberty, value our Western traditions, our Judeo and Christian traditions, and are not the least bit interested in being taken over either by a woke ideology or Islamic ideology. So yes, we have our work cut out for us. Very, very perilous times we're living in. And it's interesting, in these perilous times and in these 3 weeks in which we reflect on what were exceedingly perilous times in our distant past, perilous times in our distant past that we remember every year, and not just once a year, but we keep close. We, I would say, in Jewish consciousness, the past is always with us. It's with us today, whether it was the past of a year ago, the past of 500 years ago, or the past of 3,000 years ago. It's always right with us, not in a way that inhibits us or weighs us down, but in a way that keeps us fully informed of the importance of our history and the reason we're here, why we're here on this earth, what our purpose, what our mission is. And again, it's the mission that I hope we all share, and that is to make the world a better place, a place that can accommodate all of us peacefully, and that we can all respect one another. We all worship one God. We may not worship that one God in the same way, but that's okay. We simply need to learn to live alongside one another. I don't think it's such a difficult thing to do. I think it's so easy. It's so much harder, so much more difficult to be at one another's throats, to be at war, and to be full of hate and rage. Who needs that? What a waste of energy. What a waste of time. What a waste of our lives. If we can just focus on the good and on being there for one another and helping to lift up one another, I think we will find our lives to be so much more rewarding, and the world will be a better place. It can happen very quickly if we will all focus on it. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox, and we're going to talk a bit about the parsha, the double parsha, Matot-Masei. Let's just give a quick review of all that happens in it. It's sort of a mixed bag of many different things. It opens up with talking about vows, certain vows. A vow is a very, very serious thing in Jewish law. If you make a vow, you have to keep the vow. If you don't keep the vow, you're in serious trouble in terms of the ramifications. There are ways to annul a vow, but it's a very serious business. In fact, today, we, in our wording, we're very, very careful to not make a vow, a neder. In fact, oftentimes people will say, I'm going to do this, and then they'll say bli neder, which means it's not a neder, it's not a vow. We're very, very careful of it to this day. After the discussion about the vows, Parshat Matot talks about the war against Midian. I'm going to read from here. I'm not going to read from the beginning of the parsha about the vows like I would normally do. I'm going to read from chapter 31, verse 1, just a couple of verses in Hebrew, then in English. This is HaShem commanding Israel to take vengeance against the Midianites. Why is that? Because, of course, as we read already 2 parshiot ago in Parshat Balak, that the Midianites conspired to trap the Israelite men by seducing them with the Midianite girls, young ladies, and then enticing the men into practicing idolatry, which caused tremendous trouble within the Israelite encampment. I'm not going to review that right now, but we're going to read from chapter 31, verse 1, Hebrew, then English. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, nakum nikmat b'nei Yisrael me'et hamidianim, achar te'asef el amecha. Vaydaber Moshe el ha'am lemor, ech chalatzu me'itchem anashim latzava, v'yu al Midian latet nikmat Hashem b'Midian. Hashem spoke to Moshe, say, take vengeance for the children of Israel against the Midianites. Afterward you will be gathered unto your people. Moshe spoke to the people, saying, arm men from among yourselves for the legion, that they may be against Midian, to inflict Hashem's vengeance against Midian. 1,000 from the tribe, 1,000 from a tribe, for all the tribes of Israel, so shall you send to the legion. So Hashem says to Moshe, it's interesting, Hashem says to Moshe, take vengeance for the children of Israel against the Midianites, for what the Midianites did. And Moshe says to the people, saying, arm the people to fight against Midian, to inflict Hashem's vengeance against Midian. Vengeance is Hashem's. It's interesting, vengeance in Nekama, in Judaism and Torah in Torah thought is not a bad word. Today you don't think vengeance is a bad thing. We're not. In fact, even in the Israeli army today, the word vengeance is not used, much to the chagrin of many people like me, because vengeance actually has a positive value. 12 innocent children were killed yesterday in Israel, 2 days ago in Israel, I guess 4 days ago in Israel. And yeah, we should take vengeance. Vengeance is a powerful tool. It's not something we should be afraid of or shy away from. And right here, Hashem says to Israel, take vengeance for yourselves. And Moshe says to the children of Israel, let's take a vengeance on Hashem's behalf. It was what Midian did to Israel was an insult to Israel and an insult to the God of Israel. So yes, vengeance should be taken. And indeed, Israel forms an army. They completely slaughtered the Midianites, including Bilam, who was also killed in this war, the heathen prophet. And afterwards, there's a very long section in Matot about the division of the booty. It's very, very involved, and there's a lot of back and forth, and Moshe giving instructions. He's not so pleased with the way things are working out. Finally, they get it right. And then the leaders of the tribes of Reuven and Gad come before Moshe, and they say, listen, we just liberated all this land east of the Jordan. It's great land for our livestock, and we'd like to settle here and not cross over the Jordan. Now, Moshe, of course, becomes very, very upset. He says, what? Again, we're going through this? Don't you remember what happened with the spies when they said we don't want to go into the land of Israel? The punishment that we received, this is unacceptable. He said, unless you vow, and here they did make a vow, a sacred vow, that you will join your brethren in the wars against the inhabitants of Canaan, and you won't return to your houses east of the Jordan until everyone else has conquered and settled into their inherited lands. And they made that vow. And in fact, we'll read in the book of Joshua that they kept their word, and so they remained east, also with half of the tribe of Manasseh. They remained east of the Jordan, greatly expanding the landmass of the land of Israel. And then after that, we go to Parshat Masei. And I'll just read the first couple of verses there. Ele mas'ei b'nei Yisrael asher yatz'u me'eretz Mitzrayim litziv'otam beyad Moshe v'Aharon. Vayichtov Moshe et motzaihem l'mas'eihem al pi Hashem ve'ele mas'eihem l'motzaihem. These are the journeys of the children of Israel who went forth from the land of Egypt according to their legions under the hand of Moshe and Aaron. Moshe wrote their goings forth according to their journeys at the bidding of Hashem, and these were their journeys according to their goings forth. And Moshe goes on to list 42 different locations where Israel was encamped throughout the 40 years in the wilderness. Now, as you know, the book of Numbers covers in detail the first year or so of Israel's time in the wilderness and the final year in the wilderness. 38 years in between are not covered, but they are, those places where Israel encamped during those 38 years are part of this list of 42 encampments. Some of the encampments, as we know, Israel stayed in for a very long time, almost all the time that they were in the wilderness, and some for a very short time. But it's very interesting. The number 42 is a very, very sacred number, holy number in Jewish thought for very many different reasons, and it appears in different forms. How do I say that? Because for example, there is a very, very beautiful prayer that we say each morning and on other occasions called Ana B'Koach, and it consists of 42 words. So that is an expression of the of 42. There's also a way of finding the number 42 in the Kaddish that we say many times during the prayer service. And there's many other occasions, moments where this 42 arises. And one thing we know about the 42 is that it is a number that always represents a passage from either of time or of space or of spirituality, a spiritual level. When we say a Kaddish in our prayer service, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, and within it is contained this 42, it always is either raises us up a level or toward the end of the prayer service lowers us down a level. But it's there in order to raise or lower. It's always movement. It's always leading from one place to the other. In this case, the 42 encampments, it's what carried Israel from enslavement to freedom to the land of Israel. And of course, it's also a traditional understanding of looking at these 42 journeys, that they represent 42 journeys in our lives as we go from the womb to childhood, to growing up, to eventually becoming fully responsible, and then hopefully to attain freedom through our worship of HaShem, adherence to the Torah, and make it to the Holy Land. And so yes, we all have a journey, and our journey can be likened to the journey of the Israelites in the wilderness. And as Israelites in the wilderness, we also, many of us, I don't know if all of us, but many of us have some pitfalls where we screw up and where we might, cause ourselves to lower ourselves or to be stuck in a place for longer than we would want to. But ultimately, if we stick with the program and stay focused, we move forward. And each time we move forward, we're also moving upward and gaining in our knowledge and in our depth of knowledge and in our relationship with Hashem and in our love of Hashem and our fellow human beings. And hopefully we make this journey with success and with great happiness. So those are the 42 stations that Israel encamped in throughout her time in the wilderness. Following that in Matot-Masei, the Torah goes into talks about the borders. What will be the borders of the Holy Land of Israel? And of course, those geographical locations that it mentions are very recognizable to anybody who's been to Israel today. We know exactly what he's talking about. And then the Torah talks about who the eventual Hagrala, the eventual raffle for the lands, and who will be the tribal leaders who will represent each of the tribes. And then it talks about, Hashem commands Moshe concerning the cities of the Levites, because the Levites, of course, the Levitical tribe of Levi, has no nachalat, has no land inheritance in the land of Israel. Its inheritance is its service in the Holy Temple, whether they be Kohanim, temple priests, or Levites, Leviim, who also have a service to do in the Holy Temple. So they are given certain cities and a certain amount of land around the city so they can grow and raise the food that they'll need to survive. And then as part of this same discussion, the Torah talks about these same 6 cities. Well, there'll be 48 cities altogether for the Levites, if I understand correctly, but 6 of those cities are also cities of refuge. And those are cities where if a person who has committed manslaughter, unintentionally killed another man, can flee to those cities. And he flees to them because a person who's a blood relative of the person who was killed might wish to pursue them and kill them, to take vengeance, actually, on the death of their family, their blood relative. And so, but if a man accidentally, completely unintentionally killed another man, he is not guilty of murder, and he can flee to these cities of refuge where he needs to stay for the rest of his life, or until the Kohen Gadol passes away. This is a very interesting concept. We posted something just today on our Facebook page concerning this and giving an explanation that Rashi provides. And of course Rashi is citing older midrashic sources, and basically the understanding as Rashi presents it is that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is responsible for the spiritual health of the entire nation. And if tragedies are happening, if bad things are happening, even unintentionally, it's a reflection on the Kohen Gadol as well. And so there's a connection between the Kohen Gadol and this person who accidentally killed another person. So they're sort of tied together, their fate is tied together. So if the Kohen Gadol passes away while someone is still serving their time, as it were, in a city of refuge, and that person can go free, and he will not be, his life will not be threatened by someone wishing to take vengeance. So yes, the Torah goes into a lot of depth about this particular subject, about the cities of refuge, and it will do so again, I believe, more than once in the book of Deuteronomy. It's a subject that the Torah returns to more than once. Following that, the Parshat Masei talks about the heads of the tribes of Menashe come to Moshe, and they say, wait a minute now, you gave the 5 daughters of Tzlofchad the inheritance of their father, but we're concerned now that should they marry out of the tribe, then our tribe will lose our inheritance in the land of Israel. So Moshe understood where they were coming from, and Hashem commanded Moshe to tell them that yes, the daughters of Tzlofchad, in fact all the women of that generation, the generation of conquering and inheriting the land of Israel, needed to marry within their tribe, so that tribal inheritance would not pass on inadvertently to other tribes. Once those tribal borders were set, then the ban against tribal intermarriage ended. But again, practical consideration comes up, and it is dealt with immediately. So that actually brings us to the conclusion of the Parsha, and the final words of the Parsha are, these are the commandments and the ordinances that Hashem commanded through Moshe to the children of Israel in the plains of Moab, at the Jordan by Jericho. And of course, Moshe now is to go up to Har Nevo, Mount Nevo, and pass over to the other side, as it were, to leave this world. But he's not going to do so until he has his final words in the book of Deuteronomy, which we begin next week. Thank you so much for being with me. Temple Talk.